the selectmen in the Enfield Budget Committee. There are 3 selectmen here tonight, so I'm going to officially open this meeting of the Enfield Select Board, 7 o'clock, February 8th. Thank you.
And I would like to open the meeting for the Enfield Budget Committee. Do I have a motion to open the public hearing on the budget?
So moved.
All in favor?
Aye. Aye.
Presentation?
I'm sorry. I was distracted by muting something. Oh, hold on. Wait one second. I have to share it. There we go. I'll get it ready.
All right, thanks all for coming. This is the 2023 Enfield Budget Public Hearing. Next slide. Consistent with past years, processes not changed. The town manager works on the budget with department heads, and he presents it to the budget committee for review. The focus is on maintaining core services and maintaining quality of life, while as well keeping an eye on spending to make sure we don't have any leaks in the budget. Next slide. Key considerations for this year. There are several slides on this topic. One is the level of service. We are maintaining departments at existing staffing levels. We are not adding new employees. And I'll wait for the slides to come back. And then the non-labor expenses, we are adjusting for essentially things such as inflation, changes in contract services, new contracts negotiated with, for example, Casella, which is not this year, but it comes in future years. So we are essentially maintaining things the way they are. Any questions? I plan to allow for questions on each slide, so make sure everybody understands as we move along. Nope. Next slide. So a big change this year compared to prior years, I'm sure everybody is aware, is inflation. It's kind of went sky high over the past year. So I made a graph of the inflation over the past 20 years as an illustration. The site for the source is shown, and the inflation rate based on the Boston regional metric for this year, 7%. Questions? Next slide. So labor, we considered 2 factors. One was, again, the cost of living, like you saw on the prior slide, which is 7%. The other one is being competitive in the local labor market. As some of you may have known, we've lost 2 police officers to a neighboring town for salary reasons. Probably other reasons as well, but salary was a big reason for that. Last year, we took a look at, for example, the DPW. We made changes there, and I think for the first time in 10 years, it was fully staffed, at least for parts of the year. So having competitive wages is important. So we had a discussion in the budget committee about what is a proper adjustment for cost of living and merit. We looked at various percentages, and we, as a group, recommended 8%. That was also supported unanimously by the budget committee as well as by the select board. That 8% has a tax impact of about $26.83 per $100,000 of assessed value. Because we recognize that we don't have a lot of data to work with, we also recommended, and it was supported by the select board and the CIP committee, to do a salary study. So in the future, we have more reliable data to really set for competitive and fair pay going forward. Any questions? Yes, can you state your name so she has it for the record?
Mike Dean. Is that 2683
Is that just the 8% pay raise?
Yep, that is the 8% salary adjustment with benefits. So from 0 to 8. So per 1%, it's roughly $20,000. And so divided by the roughly 549 millions of assessed value, you get to like $3 per 100,000. So times 8.
What I'm trying to be clear about is that the full tax increase for the budget, or is that the portion due only to the increase in wages?
That's the portion only due to the increase in wages.
Thank you.
Jean Patton. So, obviously people know I was on the budget committee in the past and got totally frustrated beating my head, but. So my comment is a couple of things. I'm always happy for people to get raises. I know there's some people that work really hard, like anywhere else, and there are others that don't. I have a problem with the fact that we're gonna give this kind of a raise, but then you're gonna do the study. It seems a little backwards to me, for one thing. The other thing is, I feel like, yeah, you're using the Boston metric, but I also feel like when information has been compared, and I got answers from Ed, which I appreciate, the other day about that. It seems like a general, it was sort of a general answer, no real clear answer about who are we being compared to. We keep comparing ourselves to Lebanon, to Hanover, but we never really compare ourselves to the true demographics of our own town. We are using other places that do not have the same type of environment that we have here. So I guess that's my comment.
Thank you for the comments. So I don't remember the number of Canaan, but it was
7.2.
It was 7.2%. And the 2 police officers we lost was to the town of Canaan because the pay was higher. So last year too, we also compared to Canaan. I think last year Canaan was offering, I think 5% or something like that, and we matched it or went 1% higher to be tried to close the gap.
Well, I think using just one town is not a very good way to kind of compare things. And I remember when I was on the budget committee last year, we, threw more money at the DPW workers, and said, oh, if we give them more money, they're gonna stay. Well, obviously, I see in the newsletter, we've lost a total of 6 people. So maybe we need to think out of the box. Maybe it's not always the money. Maybe there's more to it than that.
More comment?
No, I mean, there's multiple things that cause people to leave, but we're still losing people to pay even out of DPW. So we've got to look at it. We've got to look at the market. We did use multiple towns across the state, and we have had discussions about finding exact towns that we want to compare to in the future. But, we have a list here of 12 towns that we did, and I've been watching the municipal listserv and talking to managers all across the state. And the averages are right in that 7% range where we're looking at. So everybody's trying to keep up with the 7% cost of living.
I mean, we all know that the town of Enfield, you're gonna keep saying, we're gonna try to keep up, we're gonna catch up, we're gonna catch up. We're never gonna catch up, and we're never gonna keep up with surrounding towns. We know that. This is a town of 45 or 4,600, not 10,000, not 8,000. Yeah.
Thank you for your comments. Any other comments?
I do. Jean, one of the things that we looked at was what it costs when you lose an employee. And what we found was the cost of losing an employee ends up being about the same as giving this, or more actually, depending on multiple employees if it happens, to get them on board, trained, and so on. And so it seems wiser to me to keep the history and the experience of the employee in town, keep them here and pay them more than to throw it at training somebody else who's also here. And we had, several discussions about that. And this is what we felt was best, all around. I don't think any of us are thrilled with that kind of percent. But it's the market, you know.
One of the specific numbers, Gene, that we do know of, and I think you heard it from last year, were the replacement costs for a police officer, for example. To take an untrained person, put them through the academy so that they can then be a certified patrol officer, is about $70,000. We've lost 2 certified patrolmen to Canaan. Money issues, as well as perhaps other issues, but primarily money issues. Trying to recruit a certified patrolman to this town, as Roy would tell you, is a very difficult job. Made more difficult by the pay structure if we can't be competitive. So attempting to be competitive in the long run will hopefully keep our certified patrol officers here so that we don't have to encounter this large cost to put someone through a certification program so they can become a patrolman here in town.
I think what we concluded was basically you're gonna spend that money anyways. So let's invest in employees that we have, keep them here, and you don't have them missing, go get trained because they're new, that kind of thing. It's a better situation.
Yes.
Dolores struck off. How long were those 2 officers on the payroll?
Roy, how long were the 2 people you lost, how long were they on the payroll?
One was a little over 6 years, and the other was just over 2. Can I add on to that? Just to add in. A lot of people, I hear a lot from people, we can't compare ourselves to Lebanon and Hanover. Well, we have to. That's who we lose our workforce to. Can we match them dollar for dollar? No, I understand that. And Gene's absolutely right. There are other things we can do, but when you're not even close to the pay scale, not only of Hanover and Lebanon, but when somebody can leave to go to Canaan for $3.50 an hour or more, that's a significant pay raise. So I worked with Ed earlier this year, even before this came up, just looking at it. And we looked at a list, it came to a list with 10 or 12 towns that are between 3,600 and just below 5,000 residents that are lake towns. And I pulled all those PDs and I pulled all their pay and compared it to our pay scale. And I can tell you that, and I'll provide it to anybody who wants to see it. I can tell you that Enfield is in the bottom. We're not even in the middle. We're in the bottom of that pay scale of those towns that, so even if you take the Lebanon and the Hanover out of there and we start comparing ourselves to these other towns that are lake towns, that are bedroom communities, that feed, work into other towns, Enfield pay is in the lower scale that we weren't 8 years ago, 6 years ago, 7 years, 8 years ago. We did about a 5-year period where we were either at the cost of living or below the cost of living for our pay increases. And unfortunately, that caught up to us after about 5-6 years. That caught up to Enfield. Last year, we did 5%, which matched Canaan. This year, we're asking for 8% because 7% is 7.2% is the average, 7 to 7.2 is kind of the average in this area of where people are going. That's less than 1% over just keeping up with everybody else. And that's going to close that gap just a little bit. But what I think you're going to find is when that wage study comes back next year, that we'll be happy that we did this little bit now because so we can incrementally catch up. Are we ever going to catch Lebanon and Hanover? No, we shouldn't be below Canaan, and we shouldn't be below many of the other towns that are the same as the same kind of town as Enfield, Lake Town with approximately 36 to 5,000 people. So I commend the budget committee and the select board for seeing what we have a problem and working towards fixing it.
And I think that's why we need the wage study.
Because it's not gonna look at just Hanover and Lebanon, but it's gonna look at other Enfields around the state.
And are we looking at just wages or wages and benefits?
We can talk to the compensation people about that. Benefits are extremely difficult to look at because they're all different. I mean,
Right, but you can get,
deductibles and pharmacy plans and all that change them so much that they're really, really hard to compare. So we can look at, I mean, we can kind of look at overall. We'll look at some of that, but you know, to compare them apples to apples is extremely difficult.
I think if you go back 5 or 6 years, our benefit package is what set us apart, but that's no longer true.
One of the things that a wage study also will bring in, Gene, is what other towns have already brought in, which is step raises. So that if you reach a certain milestone, you will receive a raise for it. So it's not just an across the board looking at how things are, but it's looking at positionally what people do for the town, whether they're working for the DPW, driving a backhoe, or whether they're a patrol officer, or whatever they're doing for the town, or working administratively for the town. And then looking at things like defining some milestones that people can achieve, some certifications, so that once achieved, there's the opportunity for them to get additional pay for that achievement.
Any other comments?
Yeah, and there are also towns that are offering bonuses to attract new hires. It's so difficult.
Any other comments? And next slide. To remind people too, last year, 2 building projects were approved. So one was the public safety building. That loan was secured. The full payment of that loan is around 470, but next year only 270 will impact our taxes because I believe it has to do with a mid-year event kind of thing. So you'll see an increase for next year, and then the full payment will come into play in 2024. Similarly, Whitney Hall, that loan, I believe, was signed yesterday. So that loan will not impact next year's taxes at this point, but will start impacting the taxes in 2024 and 2025. So essentially, the 2 building projects together will go from no impact in 2022 to a little bit of impact in 2023 to more in 2024, and then by 2025, you'll probably see the full impact of both loans on taxes. The full impact of both loans on 2 taxes was, so I think was it 79 and 55?
I think so. I didn't bring that paper
Okay.
with me, but yeah, and that'll change with valuation and things. So at
Okay.
this point, we're right there.
So-
It's a little bit higher than what we had talked about last year, but
So
not much.
In next year's budget, we have 270,000 towards loan payment on the public safety building and 0 towards Whitney Hall. Any questions? Next slide. So the proposed general government operating budget is $6.6 million, which is a 12% increase. Without the impact of the public safety building at the 7.6% increase, that's $718,000. Total increase 270 for the public safety building and 447 as a result of largely the inflation and labor market pressures. There's also other impacts as a result of changes to non-labor expenses such as cost of raw materials, goods, fuel prices, things like that. So it's roughly 1/3 public safety building, 2/3 continuing to offer the same services we are today. Any questions?
Hello,
Hi, can you state your name?
David Buffet. I wasn't recognized with the question regarding the increases related to building over the next few years. Do you have any projections in terms of what percentage tax increases those will incur once they're fully, once we've fully taken the loans out? That sounds like big dollar amounts anyway.
So can you go back the slide? So for Whitney Hall, it would be about $55 per $100,000 in valuation. We can't really put a percentage on that because that's like predicting the future. And I believe I can run the calculator real quick. Give me 70.
79.
It's $79 per 100,000 for
When we get to the full thing.
when you get to the full payment for the safety building. So the total would be 79 plus 55.
So basically 135 per 100,000 if we applied it to this current budget. That's a pretty hefty increase.
Right. But that's what was voted on at the town meeting last year. Yes.
Yeah. Save your shekels.
Next. So any other questions on this slide? Next slide. So this just gives a graph of history of the budget and the increases. So a comment that was made earlier by Ron.
Just one question.
Yes, can you state your name?
Jim Fickett.
Okay.
My capital expenses that we voted on last year.
Okay.
Is inflation taken into account in any way in that projection? I mean, if we borrow enough money for what it would cost now and inflation continues to be high, will we be able to complete those projects?
We're working to complete those projects. We do have a capped amount that we can spend, so it's not gonna be that we have to spend more than that. We'd have to come back to the voters to do that. So we're working really hard right now. We've had a few meetings with our contractors on the public safety building to not change the building. I don't want to make it sound bad because I know we've had problems in the past, but we're manipulating that building in a way where we have a very quality structure that still fits within the budget that we set last year. And we'll see what happens when we get to the Whitney Hall, but I'm pretty sure we can make that happen too. And we continue to look for grants and other funding to help offset some of that cost and allow us to get the building that we need.
Isn't it the case that the loan was built with an anticipation of inflation, but the 7% has exceeded that?
Yes.
Didn't they put some of that into the planning?
They put some of the inflation into there, but inflation's just what we were supposed to do. So.
Other questions?
Was about 3% in there.
So this slide just shows the history of the budget. So one comment police chief made is that in the past years, we didn't really keep up with, COLA, and I actually graphed it. I decided not to include COLA on this chart to make this chart even more complicated, but for the years like 2016 through 2021, the changes in the budget were below inflation, significantly below inflation in some cases. So there's a 12% increase, and again, a third of that is as a result of the first payment towards the building for this year. Next slide. Just the history of tax rates, because I thought that would be useful. It's often shown in the table. So the blue is the total tax rate. So it used to be around 20 and then went up to 25, which I assume is largely due to the school renovation. And then the town was for a long time around 6, stayed flat, and then slowly increased to about 7.5, and I will increase again, 2/3 inflation related and 1/3 as a result of the building project. We expect that the tax rate would be around 8.72. And that is an estimate. Any questions?
That's not the total tax rate.
That's just the town portion.
Right.
I didn't want to go and predict what the total tax rate would be, because
Yeah, we don't
that's
have a,
outside of our, purview. So the town portion went, what is it now,
747.
747 to 872. Any questions? Next slide. A little bit of history. I buttoned this up from what was it before, the undesignated fund balance. So as most of you know, it kind of went through a roller coaster ride over the last several years, where it went down significantly from 2011 to 2015. I believe at some point after that, the select board set a policy. I don't remember what year that was. Maybe somebody here remembers, but they set a policy to try to achieve a 12% of total operating expenses.
It's more based kind of around the
Okay.
total tax need for the
Okay.
town.
Yep.
But it's a pretty hefty equation that includes school budget and
Right.
our budget and a
So-
few other things.
The target was set for 12%. That was met actually last year and this year. And so going forward, we are looking at maintaining that policy. So if you go to the next slide, you'll see that history. So in 2010, the undesignated fund balance was around $1 million. It then went kind of nosediving in 2015, where it went negative 200,000, and then has over the last 6-7 years has been recovering. By 2021, 2022, we're right at the solid green line. The solid green line is the 12% target. And then the dashed lines below and above are the range that the select board had set, but we are essentially on target and we plan to maintain that target. Next slide. So this is just some numbers that are behind the prior slide again. Budget expenditures. The surplus has been a big discussion over past years. As you saw in some of the years, it was kind of high, but last year was $268,000. And if you go to the next slide, it will show what the portions of those are. Of the $268,000, 76% is associated to unfilled positions, and the remainder 24% is related to non-labor expenses. Any questions on the undesignated fund or surplus? I know I kind of raced through a lot of stuff. So from a financial point of view, we're in a good spot. We're much better off than we were 6 years ago. Next slide. So for 2022, I believe CIP, budget committees, and the select board have reviewed and voted to approve using the surplus for a number of one-time expenses. Those include the Shed Street demolition and abatement, which if you have questions, they can ask these guys. I don't know the history on that. So the phase 2 of the master plan, the compensation study we talked about, the strategic plan, the Hughes Park backstop replacement, update to the town website, improving the cemetery signages, as well as the emergency plan. Total value of that is $165,000. You'll note that is below the expected 268 surplus. And the reason for that is the 268 surplus is unaudited. And we don't want to spend all of it to have it in an audit come back lower and then have a negative again. Any questions on use of surplus?
Just one point. The reason we went with the Shed Street being using undesignated funds is because when you go and sell that property, that money's going to go into the general fund. So it in fact would drive up the undesignated fund that year. So we felt that this is a good one-time usage. And the abatement means because of what it was before, we have to make sure the land is sellable. because there were drains there, because it was a DPW prior to that, which means over the years, oil got into the ground, so it's going to, the 75,000 is going to be the cost to basically tear down those sheds and make the land usable and sellable.
And that's based on an engineering study which has already been accomplished. So there has already been preliminary excavation of the site and examination of the site by engineers who have determined that this is what needs to be done to finish that project, and therefore it can then hit the market.
And we thought it was important to finish it.
It fulfills a long-term goal of the town to conclude that project.
Steve Patton. So what needs to be done to the ground to make this sellable? It was my impression that when April was town manager, that all of this was taken care of.
There's some continued testing that needs to be done. Last year, we got the phase 2 environmental back. There's a couple more things they want to test before they give us the okay to move forward. And a big portion of that is underneath the slabs of those buildings. So they want the buildings removed, and then they can do some soil testing underneath the buildings to double check that. And as soon as we get the EPA's blessing that it's clean, then we can move forward and sell that property.
Additional questions? Next slide. So the 3 warrant articles that would come up are, so Article 8, to see if the town would vote to raise and appropriate the budget committee recommended sum of 8.194 million and change of general municipal operating funds. Note that includes water, sewer, and other funds that are offset by revenues. That's why the 6.6 million is different from this number listed here, with $165,000 to come from the unassigned fund balance. And then the next 2 articles are again to do the standard capital improvement program, the CIP funding. And the last one, I believe, is also a standard one, is putting the money in the employee and retiree benefit expendable trust fund. Any questions on the warrant articles?
One of the items that Dan will point out best, please.
Is that we have gotten to the point in CIP where, and with the increase in interest, we're not going to be going out getting loans. Okay, there will be no articles this year for loans. Everything is going to be paid in cash. And we also received some ARPA funds, which is the American Rescue Plan, which we were able to use to purchase the ambulance, cruiser, and DPW truck. Now, the offset to that, the ARPA funds, is the $500,000 has been set aside because we have to purchase the public safety building. So that will be coming out of the CIP fund.
The land.
The land.
The land, I'm sorry, the land. At the time last year, it was thought that we could use ARPA funds for that, but like most legislation, they give you the money and then they tell you what you can use it for. You cannot use it to build, to buy land with it, which is why CIP will be paying for the land, while ARPA funds, which we thought we were going to use for the land, will be used to buy equipment, which fits within the legislation. But we're hoping going forward that we don't have to do loans anymore. And in fact, over the next 4 years, there are going to be 5 loans that are retired, which means that will put more funding into the CIP and allow us to keep buying equipment with cash. This is year 11 of the program, and this is where we wanted to be. We had said our idea is to get it to the point where we can pay cash and not have to have 10, 12-year loans. The big one that's going to be paid off is going to be the Jones Hill. This will be the last year for Jones Hill. After next year, there'll be no cruisers, no small equipment. The large ones, well, the newest one is going to be the fire truck, which was from last year. So that's got, that was a 10-year loan. And the other one is the Oak Hill Bridge, is the other new one from last year. So we're hoping going forward that we'll be able to pay cash. So all this is going to be the only article related to CIP this year.
Any other questions or comments? Yeah, that's the last slide.
Oh, then I do have a question.
Okay.
So, I have a question in regards to the ambulance and like where we're at with like, people being able to work, revenue. I know earlier this year, somewhere I read, I think it was a suggestion from Katie, which I actually thought was a great idea about considering to, have backup from Canaan rather than Lebanon. Just curious if that's been discussed, looked at, thought about. I'm just sort of wondering.
That particular has not been talked about very much, but we have been having some discussions of how we can do some of those things a little different and regionalize in a different way to be able to make sure we're covered. So
And,
we can definitely have that discussion.
and what about like revenue from the ambulance billings, like, you know, are we,
I don't have the exact numbers, but we're collecting a lot more than we were in the past. The new company that we're working with and getting paperwork done a little bit quicker is allowing us to collect at a better percentage than we have been in the past. And I think it's closer to 50% now than it was pretty low before.
and what about like people to work and whatnot? I know it's an on-call and all of that sort of thing, but.
For the most part, I think we have people a lot of evenings, but during the daytime is when, you know, they're working their normal jobs and we're relying on Lebanon mostly during the daytime.
One of the advantages we see to the new safety facility is that it will attract people who want to be EMTs, et cetera. We've talked to the police department, the fire department about cross-training as well. So we're looking at cross-training, we're looking at making a facility where people want to be there. As we all know, based on being familiar with what the current ambulance facility is, and even what the current fire station is, if we have a modern facility in which we can attract good people who want to be there, then we can perhaps make a dent in the problem, admittedly, of not necessarily having enough ambulance staffing to be available once there are calls, even in the evenings.
I hope you're right, Tracy.
Well, I know that there have been issues in the past. And so one of the concrete things, literally concrete things that we think we can do is provide the new safety facility. And if we have the new safety facility, then we believe we can attract the people who want to be there as volunteers. In the case of the ambulance corps, they're paid, but I mean, they volunteer to be there. But also fire crews as well. And cross-training with the police department and the fire crews, we believe we can improve the level of services in a new facility.
And we are working on that and talking about that as cross-training and getting more people that are available to respond. So we are trying to brainstorm those things and find ways to do that.
Yeah.
I don't know if
Dave?
has the question.
Hello?
Hi, Dave.
Did you recognize me?
I recognize you. You can ask your question.
Okay. Can you go back to the previous slide, please? That was the three articles. The one previous to that, please. There we go. So what I see there is a total of about a little over $8 million to be raised from the taxpayers. What is the percentage increase of that compared to that collected from taxpayers during the current year?
So the total increased by 7.87%.
For the
So-
general operation fund.
No, he's asking for the full. So he's, right, so hold on, when you say collected from taxpayers, remember, the $8.1 million doesn't all get collected from taxpayers because it includes things like water and sewer funds, which are offset by revenue from people who are in the water and sewer system.
So can you tell me what percent increase from taxpayers is incorporated in this budget?
So there's a total
13.7.
Yeah, because you gotta count the buildings.
1.7.
No. You go down below with the other stuff added in, the total increase with everything wrapped in one big ball is 16.7. The general operating budget with the public safety building is 50. And there's
Did I
The
hear
two other warrant
16.7%?
16.7 with the CIP article. if that
Oh, right.
passes.
Yeah, so with everything included, yes.
Ouch. Thank you.
You have a question? Yes.
Oh,
So, Dolores, so how much of my taxes?
so
Dan looks puzzled.
I'm really puzzled,
I,
because the only increase in CIP is $25,000. Or $26,000. So that's a nickel. I thought we were down in the 12s,
I haven't answered my question.
including the
yes,
building.
so. Hold on, there's two questions flowing, so my mind was confused. So can you restate your question? Okay,
Yeah.
so it is expected to go up from, what was it, 7.87? No,
$1.25.
so from 7.8, no,
7.4.
47 to 8.72. So $1.25 for the town portion,
And that's if the value stays
the same.
That's if the value stays the same. It could come down a little bit more than that. If the property value raises by 1%, which is
Right.
pretty much the long-term average. That would be.
So if the property value, that becomes to 7.85, right?
So it's 125 per 100,000. Is that what we're
Oh,
saying?
no. So if the property value goes up by 1%,
No, that's per thousand.
if the property value goes up by 1%, it would go from 7.47 to 8.64.
That's a question.
It should be between $1.17 per thousand and $1.25 per thousand.
Right. So 117 per 100,000, because people
So we,
use that number more than they use the per thousand number.
All right,
$117 per $100,000
That's value.
of assessed value.
That's the building.
That's the
Hmm?
projection.
That's the low end. Ed just said 117 to 125
Right.
range.
right,
Right.
we can add a slide. We'll add a slide on that.
I can put.
good idea. The popular question.
I know, but there's so many variables.
Yeah.
Okay, we'll add a slide at the town meeting to kind of give an overview of what could the percentage, what could be the increases per 100,000 for different scenarios, but it's like, it's a whole page with lots of numbers, and so I'll pick some key numbers out of it.
I would do that. I would just do that range, 117 to
Yes.
125. That's the probability that it'll be
agree.
somewhere in there.
We
Okay.
don't sit.
True, so we'll do that. Any other questions? Yep.
Mr. Chairman, are there any estimates at all from the school board yet on what their,
I
what
heard
their
they,
increase would be?
I don't know, I heard they voted on it, but
Yeah, they were proposing a 0.1.
0.1, but then you've got another $500,000 in the new teacher's contract for next year.
0.1.
0.1%.
For the operating
For the
budget
operating.
minus salaries, yeah.
Dan is right on that.
Yeah.
Dave, you have other questions?
Well, I just, Dan said it first.
Okay.
That the baseline budget is up by 0.1%, but there is a negotiated teachers, staff, and I'm not sure who else.
It's teachers.
Contract in that, mostly teachers. That is the extra 500,000 or so.
Any other questions? Make a motion to end, close the public hearing.
So moved.
All in favor?
Aye.
All right, what else do we have on the agenda?
You have to approve
We'll
the.
do the warrant articles and vote.
That's what I thought. Nothing else, right? There's no meeting minutes to approve?
No, and the select board can decide if they want to revote or if they like their votes from yesterday.
Folks, do we like the vote from yesterday?
That's fine with what yesterday.
Okay,
I have no objection to our vote yesterday.
okay. You need us to be here?
Nope.
No, but
You
it-
need me to be here as a member of the
Yeah.
board. Here we go. You guys can go. Thank you. I need a motion to close the select board meeting. Yep.
I should stay, so if you stay,
Actually gonna stick around.
so then we'll just
A motion to close our share of the meeting?
Keep it open.
keep it open.
Keep it open?
We're not-
All right.
Because they're gonna stay.
With us,
Stay.
You've got a quorum, you have.
Those
to-
rowdies.
Troublemakers.
All right. So we're approving the full 8, right?
That's the feedback.
That's the
All
argument.
right. Not the 6.
It's your job.
I know, this is my first time. I'm doing my best. So we'll vote on the budget first,
Yeah, we need
and then
a
we'll go to
motion
the
for
article.
a recommendation
Right, so,
to approve. Article.
right, but we'll vote on the budget first, as Alyssa recommended. And then we'll vote for recommending Articles 8 through 10. Okay, so I'd like to make a motion for the budget committee to vote and approve a general municipal operating fund of $8.194847. So $8 million, $194,847, with $165,000 to come from the undesignated fund. Anybody have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Anybody abstaining or against? Nope. We all voted in favor. Okay, you have a motion to recommend Article 8. Should I read Article 8 or should we look at the slides?
Read it.
I make a motion, we recommend Article 8 as printed.
Second.
Whatever.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
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 Remember.
Anybody against or abstaining?
I didn't want to block review.
That's right. All right. Anybody want to make a motion to recommend Article 9 as printed?
Yeah.
That's the CIP budget.
I recommend that we accept the CIP budget as printed.
I'll second it.
All in favor?
It'd be a motion to recommend that article.
Just to recommend.
Recommend the article as, CIP article as printed and as recommended.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, motion for Article 10 to recommend Article 10 as printed.
I so move.
Okay,
Second.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, any other business? Any other public comments? Yeah, anybody want to make a motion to adjourn the meeting?
Make a motion, we adjourn.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Make a motion to adjourn the selectmen's meeting. All in favor? Aye.
Thank you, folks, for coming.
Yeah, thank you all very much. Appreciate this.
You did nothing to the So, our sister.
Well.
Hi, John.
My daughter.
Make that go for granted, Carol.
Yeah, I'm sure they're still there.
I am too.
Yeah, they were starting at 7:30, right?
No, 6:30.
Oh, 6:30.
I'm already.
Maybe lucky, maybe they're gone.
It's a social game, Dave, and he has to go at least 2 hours.
That is one of the things that.
Did you realize?
Right now.
I'm trying.
It was a good meeting.
16.1.
I thought budget committee need double. Yeah. So.
I took the liberty of looking up on this.
Look it up online.
We have lost a couple of guys. We just.
So I think it's,
Newtown administrative.